Hello everyone and welcome to today's look at the preview cards from over the weekend from Phyrexia All Will Be One. Before we get started, thanks to Caffeinated Gamers for sponsoring our video. Remember to like and subscribe so you can get further content like this throughout Phyrexia All Will Be One spoiler season. And let's get started. So first we got Ambulatory Edifice. For 2 and a black mana, you get an artifact creature that's a Phyrexian construct. It's a 3/2. And when Ambulatory Edifice enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. When you do, target creature gets -1/-1 until the end of turn. So this is, in my mind, probably just a limited playable card. The ability to potentially kill a creature is nice, but that's probably not good enough in black in standard. Next we have Watchful Blisterzoa. For 4 and 2 blue mana, you get a Phyrexian Jellyfish. That's a 4/4 with flying. And Watchful Blisterzoa enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. When Watchful Blisterzoa dies, draw cards equal to the number of oil counters on it. Okay, probably more of a limited card again. 6 mana for a blue creature that's only a 4/4 isn't very good in terms of the overall power level of the card. Getting to draw cards with it at the end is nice, but there's no guarantee you'll have any oil counters on it to draw them. Next we have Incubation Pod for a green mana. Incubation Pod enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. And this is an artifact. And for 4 mana, you can remove an oil counter from Incubation Pod and create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. And then you can activate this only as a sorcery. So this, if we do end up seeing an oil deck that is kind of around the Filigree Silex as kind of its finisher, I think this is a good card to put in there because it's got those 3 oil counters on it. So you play this on 1, you play Silex on 2, you tap Silex, now you've got 4 already. You tap Silex on turn 5 or turn 3, now you've got 5, and hopefully you can generate some more oil counters. Hopefully have some creatures come into play at some point that can do some damage. And then, you won't have, if you can get your opponent down to that 10 life, then you can sacrifice the Silex, remove the 10 oil counters, and win the game that way. But there's a lot of different options here, I think, to make that deck work. We'll just have to see what gets there. Alright, next we have Magmatic Sprinter. For 2 and a red mana, you get a Phyrexian Warrior with haste. That's a 3/2. And when Magmatic Sprinter enters the battlefield, put 2 oil counters on target artifact or creature you control. At the beginning of your end step, return Magmatic Sprinter to its owner's hand unless you remove 2 oil counters from it. So I can see this as one of those cards that's very repeatable. You cast it, you put your 2 oil counters on something else, it comes back to your hand, you recast it, you put 2 oil counters on something else, and very quickly you are building up those oil counters to do some damage, and hopefully along the way Magmatic Sprinter has done 3-6 damage to your opponent, and that ability to do that damage can get them down to that 10 you need for Filigree Silex to go off and then end the game at that point. But again, we're going to have to see if that deck is really playable given what's already in standard. Next we have a Traxxas Fang. For 3, you get an artifact creature that's a Phyrexian insect. It's a 2/2. Traxxas Fang enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. So another creature that's going to have oil counters that could be in a oil counter deck. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may remove an oil counter from a Traxxas Fang. When you do, target creature you control gains your choice of Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, or Lifelink until the end of the turn. We already have a card similar to this in standard in the Steel Seraph, which is the artifact angel in white that we got from the Brothers War, that is seeing more and more play because of its ability to basically do everything that a Traxxas Fang does, except for giving something Death Touch, which isn't a big deal in the larger scheme of things. So I can see this fitting into an oil counter deck again, but definitely one that has some proliferate in it, so that way you can go ahead and use this ability over and over again to gain life, give a creature flying to get in some damage when it might otherwise not. So I think that this has some playability in an oil counter deck. Last today we've got the Mycosynth Gardens. It's a land that's a sphere. You can tap it to add colorless mana. You can pay 1 mana and tap it to add a mana of any color. Or you can pay X mana and tap it, and the Mycosynth Garden becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. So kind of in the low end, you're playing Reckoner Bankbuster in your deck. It becomes a 2/2, or it becomes you pay the 2 mana, you get another copy of Reckoner Bankbuster. And lands, again, are harder to get rid of than artifacts are. So I think just because of that, I think this is going to see play, given that example on its own. But we have a lot of good artifact creatures in Standard right now that are kind of looking for a home, and maybe a deck that forms around this card and then artifacts in general is something that we will see moving forward. All right, that's it for today. That is the Phyrexia All Will Be One spoilers from January 21st and 22nd. I expect to see a bunch of spoilers today, Monday the 23rd, so we'll be back at it later today. So I will see you then with more Phyrexia All Will Be One spoilers.